From fertilizer prices to foreign trade, farmers don't just watch the weather, they watch the world. Welcome back to Rooted and Restless. I'm Marianne Smith Edge, and today I'm thrilled to have a very special guest, which is always appropriate at the beginning of April, and it's amazing that I actually was able to snag a little time with a farmer. Jesse Horn, a Kentucky and Owensboro-based farmer, but has a wide range of area that he covers in the world of ag and seed supply company. Jesse's also an ag economist, a University of Kentucky alumni, a community leader, a great father, and all around a great guy and a risk taker. So Jesse, it's so great to have you, and it's so fun to have someone in the studio because people have been watching. They kind of see other people through a Zoom. I always say that farming isn't for the faint of heart, for one who grew up on the farm as well. And I'd say you have a really strong heart at this point. So you grew up on a farm, you went to college. What brought you back to the farm?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I was honored to be asked, and we haven't known each other a good while, and I've been following you as you put this podcast together, and I think it's great. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share my story. I did grow up on a farm. For a long time, it's all I thought I would ever do, and then I thought differently, and was at the University of Kentucky and finishing up a degree in ag economics, and just really needed to see what else the world had to offer. So I left the farm for a number of years, got to do some really exciting things and spread my wings a little bit, and that ended up being good for both me and my dad. Having a employee that's not your son for a while taught him a few things about how that relationship could be different, and it was good for me to go out and work for other people as well. So I came back to the farm in the fall of 2008. At the time, temporarily, I was finishing up a graduate degree, had finished all my coursework, but had sort of stalled out on my thesis, and had been working at a nonprofit, lost my job. The economy crashed in 2008, and always feel like things happen for a reason. Sometimes we just don't know what they are. And it was pretty bummed out about that, but I thought, I'll buckle down. This was in May. I'll buckle down. I'll write my thesis. I'll defend it at Christmas. I'm going to take the LSAT and go to law school. My wife's from the Cincinnati area. I thought surely I can get into Northern Kentucky University's law school program. And we had sort of been talking about moving that direction anyways. She was in pharmacy school there. And my dad called, and he said, need some help, in a bind. He had an employee that had decided to go to Western Kentucky University and pursue a degree. And so we're pretty close to harvest there, and he's needing some help. And I thought, well, Dad, please try to find someone else. But I am in a position to help, and of course I'm going to do that. So I kind of hit pause on my plans, packed a not very large suitcase, came home thinking I would only be here for, a month or 6 weeks at the most. And, man, I just didn't even know I missed farming. And I just had this, overwhelming feeling. This is where I was supposed to be.
Well, and I think you portrayed, Jesse, the passion that is truly, when we talk about not fainting the heart, you have to have some passion to get through those tough times. Yeah. And as soon as you said 2008, I'm thinking, ooh, not a great time. But 18 years later, and look where you are. And what I find interesting is obviously you've combined still on the farm, but you're also involved in agriculture supply and some in seed. And so I would say you're not only taking your skill sets and your knowledge to help you and your family, but also others.
Yeah. I mean, when I came back, I wasn't married yet. I had an apartment that I could move into on our farm. I didn't have a lot of expenses, but certainly had some bills from being in college for 4 years and then going to graduate school. And so I needed to make some money, but the farm just really couldn't pay me a whole lot. 2008 was kind of the start of some good years, but we weren't there yet in 2008. And so I started growing some tobacco and got an opportunity to start selling seed, which I initially turned down. Beck's Hybrids called, and we had been growing some of their products, and I said, no, I don't have time for that, But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, I should at least see what's behind that door before I close it. And explored that opportunity, and it seemed like a good fit. That took off right away. I quit growing tobacco. Well, at the same time, the farm economy improved tremendously. The mid-'90s were really good, leading up into the late '90s, and then things got kind of rough again. And 2008 was sort of the last year of that rough period, heading into some decent years. But from 2008 to about 2016 or so, there were some really profitable years on the farm. Nobody was making the kind of money to build mansions and own second homes and that kind of thing, but we were actually making some money. And I was able to start my business. We didn't have to go out and rent more land. It was a very manageable thing, working a lot of hours, but really enjoying building that business. And I've always been a people person. I'm an extrovert by nature and just really enjoy being around people and working with people. We sort of categorize it in our business as, some people just have a servant's heart, and that's really my personality. I enjoy helping other people solve problems. So the ag supply business was a good fit for me. And of course, those are my people, I fit right in. So that business was going really well, and then the farm economy started to turn. And we're on, depending on who you ask here, year 4 or 5 of not very profitable years because yields have been impacted. We've had a lot of wet weather. At times, dry weather's hurt us, and sometimes we get both in the same year. Extremely wet springs with dry falls. If we don't get rain in August, our crops suffer. And so that's kind of where we are today in agriculture and things are tough right now. And I know we're going to get into a lot of topics, but that's what's on my mind. We're making, both as farmers and me in the ag supply business, daily decisions that it's hard to make long-term plans because the farming economy is so uncertain right now.
What makes today different than, let's say,
Sure,
the cycle 10 years ago?
Sure. So let's talk about it from both sides. So there's the yield side of things, which is weather dependent. Some parts of the country have access to irrigation water and they can make it rain, and that largely means they grow better yields. But many of those same areas, the groundwater's just not there that used to be. And we're experiencing changes in our weather pattern, seemingly more extreme. Even in our immediate area here in Western Kentucky, people just constantly talk about we have to have more equipment, we have to have larger equipment, and we have to have people that run that equipment because we may only get 3, 4, 5 days in the entire month of April to plant. And we may only get 3, 4, 5 days in the entire month of May to plant our crop. And so that means when conditions are right, we have to go really hard. And, we know that early planting equals more yield. So that largely makes sense to do that. We got short windows, so we gear up. We hire people. We buy more equipment. We buy larger equipment. We buy equipment, and this is something I do in Big H Ag Supply. We outfit equipment to be able to do a really good job at higher speeds. As a really basic planter can do the same job as a high speed planter, but they have to do it at low speeds, and conditions have to be more perfect. So the reason people invest in new technology and high speed and bigger equipment is to fill this window. We know it's proven early planting equals higher yields. So when we're in a tight situation, both timeline and economics wise, we have to try and get our crop planted when it's going to yield the most and in the window that Mother Nature gives us. So that equipment costs a lot of money.
Yes, it does.
And it's very expensive to maintain. And thus, most farms are very heavy in iron. There's just a tremendous amount of our money is tied up in hard assets. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is rent. Most people don't own all the ground they farm. But either way, if you own it, there's still an opportunity cost there for what rent you could get out of it. Or in a lot of cases, you're still paying the bank for it. So in a way, that's rent too. Right. But the cost of land ownership or rent figures in. And, that cost has gone up over the years. And in the great times, that was okay because there was still enough left. Well, now rents are pretty high. And whether that's a share crop rent or cash rent, it's really difficult to have a conversation with landowners about reducing that rent. Number one, the landowner obviously doesn't want to take less. No one wants to take a pay cut, understandably so. But there are also still, even in this environment, people standing in line to pay high rents for ground. Now that's becoming less and less of those people as we enter a continued prolonged period of low farm profits. Rents are being adjusted, but I'll just speak for myself. We've been speaking with our landowners for 2 to 3 years now about reducing rents, and we've lost some ground. And in every case, that land is being farmed. So people paid that rent to keep farming it, and that's okay. Ultimately, that's economics. If I'm not willing to pay X amount for something and you are, well, by all means,
Supply
help
and
yourself.
Demand.
Yes. So we're kind of getting hit from both sides there on high equipment costs, high labor costs, particularly in our area here. We're blessed to have a lot of really high-paying jobs. But even we've been using H-2A workers from South Africa. There's 40 countries on that list. You can bring workers in from any of them. That cost is gone up considerably. And so any way you do it, unless you're growing your own labor supply, which Americans, including farmers, are having less children, labor is expensive. And so we've got really high equipment costs, not just to purchase, but also to maintain. Really high labor costs. And the number of farms continues to shrink. We're all doing more. And then we throw in input costs. And in many cases now, and it's all relative to yield, but it costs more to grow that crop than, we'll just pull rent out for a minute, than the crop will actually earn just covering the variable expenses. So when I went to school and took business class, when the cost of producing a widget exceeds what we can sell the widget for, we shut the factory down. That's not easily done with a farm. It's not a start and stop game. It's you're in or you're out. And there's no jumping back and forth. So, everybody is holding on, waiting for things to get better. But when they continue to not get better, what do you do? And that's where we're at today.
And I think that's the stark reality that is, it's easy to complain about food costs because if that's the only thing I see, and forget that who's on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. Yes, prices have gone up, but I have a niece that lives in New Zealand, and we've been there 3 times, and they pay a lot more for food because, after
Indeed.
all, they're not growing a lot of it. It comes in. So I think we forget the value, but from the farming standpoint, you're absolutely right. And I told you earlier is that last month I had a meeting. I was actually at the National Farm Machinery Show, which is in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's an international farm machinery show.
Yes, it
Had
is.
not been there for a while, and as you well know, but a lot of folks that might be listening don't realize, is that when we talk about price, we're not talking about $100,000. We're talking about $1 million on some of those new combines I saw. So, and I had Jenny Schmidt, who's a woman farmer up in eastern Maryland, on earlier, and as she mentioned, you can't have one piece. Like, some of us may have one automobile, but you can't have the same piece of equipment, for several different crops, and that too
Yes.
becomes a challenge.
If you boil it down, most of us, we're not emotionally attached to the crop we grow. If you want me to grow purple carrots, you pay me enough to grow purple carrots, and I will grow purple carrots. I mean, that's really what it amounts to. If the demand is there, the opportunity for profits are there, the work is what we enjoy and what we love. And most of us are not particularly tied to a crop. But unfortunately, the equipment we have is. So, in corn and soybean production, and I've heard many people talk about, well, that's the problem. We've gone to these monocultures. Well, that's fine. That's fair. But the reason that we went there is because that's where the opportunity was. And so if we need to go somewhere different, we need an opportunity to do that. And there frankly isn't one there right now. If I took all the equipment I had and sold it and downsized to, let's say a fairly large vegetable farm would be 500 acres. We're currently farming about 2,300. Number one, that equipment that I've paid so much money for and paid so much money to maintain is worth less than half of what it would have been 2 years ago due to the farming economy. So I'm going to take a major hit trying to unload all that equipment and lose a fair amount of my equity in it. Number two, I do not have, and nor am I confident that I could get the labor force I would need, even through the H-2A program, to immediately begin farming in a different way. The workers are available. Now, there are issues getting them here, and including right now. We got unrest in Mexico that's causing delays at consulates. We got unrest in other parts of the world that are delaying that as well. But you need skilled, specific workers. And to draw those names out of a hat is almost, I don't even know what the odds would be. If I wanted to start growing cabbage and strawberries and peppers and tomatoes today, finding the workers that could come in that already know how to do that and do it to scale like that it's virtually an impossible task. So it's going to be a really slow burn if we're going to change agriculture in this country. Now, our livestock producers are doing okay right now.
Right.
The cattle guys are doing fairly well, but they'll tell you too, like, they bore this burden a long time. When grain was pretty good, cattle was not. And you combine that with packing issues, extreme drought in the West Midwest and further out west, wildfires, and we end up with a cattle herd that's the smallest it's been since 1956, I heard.
Right.
And I had a customer the other day that was telling me he's got 50 heifers. He intended to hold back to try and build his herd a little bit. And then he got to thinking, these are living animals, and they could die. And I can't afford that financial risk. They are profitable right now, but they also have, our cattle producers have to plan for the next time that they're not. And we know that that's coming, and it's really frustrating when you see the government respond to public outcry about the price of beef. And they talk about, importing more foreign cattle, There is a big risk for new diseases and new pests. This screwworm deal is a pretty hot topic right now in the cattle industry. And the bottom line, I think it really comes down to, we have, as an American public, we have become so disconnected from our food that we don't even understand the basic economics of how it reaches us. You don't necessarily need to know everything there is to know. We, as a farmer, I always feel like a little bit narcissist saying this, but it is kind of the reality. If you boil it down to basics, you only get to be anything but a farmer because we have farmers. As we cover the basic needs, if we go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have food and shelter. Those are the basics. And so if you're able to acquire your food with minimal effort, then you're able to focus on something else, whatever that is. So you only get to not be a farmer. You don't have to produce your own food. It frees you up to do something else. And ultimately, over time, that's led to such a lack of understanding about not only how that food arrives at the grocery store, but the people who produce it. And, as we've gotten direct payments that turned into crop insurance subsidies, and now we've received some stimulus payments, and there's always an extreme amount of public outcry about all the money the farmers are getting. And don't get me wrong, I know that there are some very large farms. I'm aware of some extremely large operations that I suppose could be categorized as corporate outfits. There are a lot of farms that are incorporated that are family farms. They're incorporated for legal reasons and tax reasons because they have multiple partners. Can you imagine owning an asset and then having it split amongst your children, and then they're owning it together, and then through just an extreme amount of luck, I guess, possibly their children owning it together. If the operation is able to stay together, you have so many owners.
Right.
You have to be incorporated. And so when people talk about corporate farms, there are very few true corporate farms. I have a taste of the corporate world, and I've never seen a farm run like a corporation.
Yeah, I think it's like less than 2% or something. Well, it's very majority are family farms.
Majority are the vast majority.
Yeah, most.
I mean, there is some vertical integration in the poultry industry,
right.
and there's some of that exists. There are some foreign investor-owned farms. There's a big farm in North Carolina. It's like 50,000 acres that's owned by some Italian investors. That exists, but it's not the norm. It's not even close to the norm.
Yeah, because we're talking 98% family farms,
and
for sure.
If for no other reason than the profit margins, even in the good times, are so low, no investor wants to own an operating farm. Now, they may own farmland. That's a fairly stable investment.
Right.
But they're not going to be involved in the operating of a farm.
Right.
You can just make so much more money doing anything else. So the question comes back, why would anybody do this? And that's a tough question to answer, and one that almost all farmers are asking themselves right now.
Now, let's hear from Mindy Herman, registered dietitian, food and nutrition writer, and a guru on all the latest food trends.
Hi, Marianne. I eat a lot of soy, so I'm really happy to share with you a few soy statistics and trends for National Soy Month. Soy is really healthy and nutritious. It has high-quality protein that matches the quality of animal protein. Some soy products, like edamame, also are rich in fiber. A lot of soy products are real foods that are less processed. Supporting sustainability, U.S. soybean farmers are cutting greenhouse gas emissions and increasing land use efficiency. According to Trends Tracker Data Essential, use of flavorful soy products like soy sauce and miso is up in U.S. restaurants, and fermented black soybeans are among the emerging restaurant menu items for 2026. Data from Innova Market Insights shows that U.S. food and beverage launches with a soy ingredient, including dips seasoned with soy sauce and frozen Asian dishes, are up 33% over the last 5 years. Enjoy!
Now, let's return to our conversation. Well, Jesse, I think you put it in a great perspective. And, my husband and I have that conversation sometimes because we have crop farmland. And, I obviously know, but I'd say, well, why don't we should grow some sorghum, or we talk about, because I get that too. Well, what? You don't grow broccoli? You don't grow tomatoes? Well, as a dietitian, we also know that, as we all discuss, and my husband and I as well, if there is a demand, we can do it. But yes. I haven't seen, because we know in this region, without going into detail, there has been some pretty nice sized vegetable operations that don't exist today because the economics didn't make it happen.
Yeah.
Didn't make it happen. So just to kind of move on a little bit and talk about what I think is so great, and you have been so gracious of your time talking through to some of the dietetics students at the University of Kentucky, where I've utilized you. I believe you a lot of times connected in a class from a cab of a combine,
yes.
which is great. But I think that's reality too, that people see that. But when people hear regenerative agriculture, and that is more of a popular terminology. You and I both know that, especially in Kentucky, no-till farming has been around since, 60s, 70s?
1974, if I'm not mistaken, yeah.
Because
Jack McClure, well, that's not the right name, but
Hopkinsville.
Yeah.
Harry Young.
Yeah.
Harry Young.
Yeah.
I mean, it was actually developed here. So it's always been, and you've painted it so well previously, farmers care about the farm and they care about the land, because obviously you wouldn't be farming today if generations before you didn't take care of it. So when we talk about regenerative, I know you've been doing some different cover crops and different things. I think give us a little picture of what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, that's kind of the buzzword of the moment here. And we have the whole degree programs at universities based around regenerative agriculture. So it's a pretty broad term, but at the base of it, most farmers are conservationists, and our goal, and I'll speak for myself here, is to try to do as well, hopefully better, but as well as we've been doing with less. And that's both driven from economics, and it's an exciting challenge, So some of that money that's spent in that high dollar equipment is aimed at doing that. So, we used to put all of our nitrogen on for a corn crop up front. Well, we might put on 250 units of nitrogen. Well, now I put some on with the planter, and some on with an applicator, and some on with the sprayer. And I'm, between 180 and 200 units, say. And, that's not only good for my pocketbook, but it's good for my soil. It's good for my crop. The crop likes to be spoon-fed along the way instead of, having this lump sum up front. And I've been in a group of kind of high management growers, and what we're really looking at there, and it's a group called Total Acre, and it's run by some of the high yield contest winners. And the main focus out of that whole thing is be a student of your crop. And so, as we dig into plant physiology and what nutrients the crop uses and when it uses them. If we're using 40% of our potassium during grain fill, or 50%, depending on the crop, 55, does it make sense to have all of our potassium spread in October? So does it make sense to spread all dry fertilizer, or should we be looking at other potassium sources? And so those are the questions that forward-thinking, high-management growers are constantly asking themselves. Am I using the right product, in the right form? Am I using it at the right time? And could I see either a cost savings or a yield increase or both by making a change there? And all of that leads to less fertilizer runoff, which we're really blessed here that that's not as big a problem as it is in other areas. Like Kentucky has just been a long-term user of waterways and no-till practices and buffer strips, and I think part of that comes from our pretty consistently high amount of rainfall we get, creating a problem in gullies and washouts and rills that we have to fix. And over time, it becomes more profitable to just seed those areas down in grass than continually work on them year after year. But we've at least in this area, I think we could say this for most of Kentucky, we've had some really good NRCS officers that have helped promote these programs, and the government has supported that. We've typically had a conservation program that's well funded for those that want to use it. And so you put all those things together, and Kentucky ends up being a model for the whole country. I mean, we have a lot of eyes on us on how we're managing cover crops and that kind of thing. You mentioned that earlier. It is something that I and my family have really got into, and it's spilled into our business as well, is the use of cover crops. And some of that was like a time management thing. We were spending a fair amount of money putting somebody in a tractor and grain drill, trying to drill some wheat in the valleys and hold the ditch banks together and all that. And drills are fairly expensive pieces of equipment to maintain. And I always had my best guys, would be with the harvest crew. So it's who could I get to put in that tractor and run that drill, and then it would get tore up. And so we started looking at how could we do this cover crop thing without impacting harvest. So we have to get most of these cover crops really respond to heat. So they need to be planted early. Well, the harvest is going on. So how do we fold that all in? And so we started putting cover crop seeders on combines, and I put them on tillage tools for customers. But we got quite a number that are seeding a cover crop while harvesting with their combines now. And so we can use less seed if we're covering every acre of the field. All we really need is for water to never get a chance to accelerate. Now, we can mix some things in and legumes and try to fix some nitrogen and all that kind of stuff. But if we're talking about erosion control, and we're capturing nutrients even at low seeding levels, that's all we really need, is the water never have a chance to accelerate. And so, I feel like our yields have responded to this, but what I can say for sure is that I'm spending less time, less wear and tear on my backhoe and tractor and box blade and dozer, fixing all these places in the spring before we plant. That means I'm getting planted earlier because I don't have to go in and do all that work, which in turn should mean higher yields and all that kind of stuff. So it's all kind of systems related, and most farmers have that kind of mindset. Like, if I can make a change that allows me to use less of something so it costs me less and makes my time more productive, I got to do that. And cover crops have become a big piece of that.
Well, I think you give a great example and reality that sometimes folks want to think that not having control, that farmers might be using too much fertilizer, or they might be using too much pesticides. And the reality is, I always say, who wants to spend more money? So you gave a great reality check that, and that's the beauty about technology now, is that, what my father was doing was latest technology, but, that was 30, 40 years ago, and how we've advanced. So you can look not just at one big field, you're looking at a plant, you're looking at a small area, so that you can really control.
We're on the verge of actually seeing this being used on farms. The technology already exists, but we have many sprayers out in the world now that have a lot of cameras on them. And so John Deere calls theirs See and Spray. Precision Planting calls theirs Symphony or Vision Nozzle. There's all these catchy terms. But basically, we're having cameras that identify weeds on the fly in real time, differentiate them from the crop, and just spray the weed. So, there are pesticides, and pesticide is the general term for all crop protection chemicals. Herbicides target plants and weeds. Insecticides obviously target insecticides. Fungicides target leaf diseases and tissue diseases. But in many cases, we're spraying the whole field, and we don't need to. Maybe there's a 60% weed density. Well, that's pretty dense. We still need to go out and spray. It's economical to spray, but that other 40% wouldn't have to be sprayed. And so those technologies they're coming on hard and fast because the economics support them. If I could knock 40% off my chemical bill, well, I know how many acres I'm spraying. I can figure the math pretty quickly on whether this technology would pay for me or not. But the other thing is, like, with those cameras, we're on the verge of farmers just being able to count every plant in the field. Like, every plant will be mapped. And so as we move toward this idea of more autonomy on the farm, which addresses our labor cost and labor shortage, there's an opportunity to manage at a level that we've never had before. And, well, that can check a lot of boxes for people who are anti-pesticide. We're definitely going to be using less. And I think that's largely a good thing, although pesticides don't scare me. We've made tremendous improvements in not only the type of pesticides that we use, but the amounts that we use. And I've had the opportunity to be on farms in multiple countries, and the way we're doing things in the United States is really cutting edge in terms of pesticide use. We've got growers here who are growing the best crops in the world with a tenth the pesticide use, and we're doing it in ways that are safer for both the operator and the handler of the pesticides, safer for the crop, and ultimately safer for the consumer.
Well, I think, Jesse, as we kind of wrap this up, and thinking about April going into Earth Month and taking care of the earth, I can't think of anyone more of a protector of the earth than you and other farmers, because it is about, you have to protect your assets, and that is definitely, as you've talked about that. But just one quick question, because I know it would sound like you have no other time other than to be in the field. But I happen to know that you have a connection to horses, but you're not racing them.
That's correct.
And I think everyone that knows anybody from from Kentucky, probably the first question you get that I have: do you own horses? And the answer is no. My husband has, but tell me just a little bit, because I think it's a great program that you're engaged with here.
Yeah. So my whole family is involved in an organization called Dream Riders of Kentucky, and I sit on the board there. My wife has volunteered a lot, and my daughter rides there. And it's a therapeutic horse riding organization that uses horses to not only physically connect and heal clients, but there's quite an emotional connection to horses too. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but if I recall, it's something like within 2 minutes of being just near a horse. You don't have to be on the horse. Your heart rate's synchronized. And even though a horse is a prey animal and they respond to your emotions and feelings, they have a way of calming people that is almost unexplainable. And I've seen some really incredible, beautiful things happen in my time there, but we had kind of a non-traditional client for us, an older gentleman that had broken his pelvis in a car wreck, and really was fighting for his mobility. He was not content to be in a wheelchair the rest of his life, and someone told him about Dream Riders, and he came out and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, I think we could, get a doctor's release that you're okay here, but and he was actually able to begin walking again on a cane, but nonetheless, there's something that physically happens on the back of a horse that moves your core in a way that's really hard to replicate with a piece of equipment or in an exercise environment, in physical therapy. And I've seen this demonstrated where we'll take a rider and they put on a black suit that's got white dots on it. And you can see all the parts of the body that are moving as this horse just walks. I mean, we're not cantering these horses and jumping on that kind of thing. But just as this, the horse walking around the arena moves your body in ways that is really hard to replicate. But it does so much for you.
I always wanted a horse, but growing up on a dairy farm, I don't think it's really true, but my father would say horses and cows don't mix.
Yeah.
So I only showed cows, not horses, because, that was it. So, well, Jesse, thank you so much for your time. I think the beauty of hearing someone from, literally from the field is that it paints a picture, one of passion, of commitment in farming, but also the stark reality of where we are doing. And I think, if anything, I would say is that we all have to understand that we have a shared responsibility.
Absolutely.
When it comes to what we eat, how it's grown.
Indeed.
But I think but here it as you have so eloquently described, is that it is about doing more with less for a purpose, and that technology has been able to do that. So truly a steward of the land.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate you having me, and I'll leave you with a kind of a final thought here is, as we've discussed, things are pretty tough on the farm, but they still, the farm still provides a really good opportunity to, I'm a little choked up here.
It's kind of like where your soul is, the heart, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To provides such a good opportunity to raise a family.
Well, even though we say that farming's a business, it is, and and it is the economics. It's also kind of that. It's so much more than that. It's You've got to have, as we started out. It's not for the faint of heart. You have to have a strong heart, but your heart really is where the soil is, so
Indeed.
to speak.
Yeah.
On that. So thank you. And, the whole concept of this is about digging deeper into the stories behind food. And as we always say at the end, every food has a story, but it's not as simple as you think. And I think, we've talked today, is that it is complex, And it takes individuals and farmers like you to help find those solutions so we all can continue to be fed and actually, and it's because of farmers like you. So here's to a good planting season and the fact that it doesn't rain too much so you're not planting again.
My grandfather always says, you never pray for rain or lack thereof. You just pray for favorable weather. So
that sounds great.
Yeah.
So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, Rooted and Restless. It's all about digging deeper into the behind the scenes about food, agriculture, and nutrition, because after all, every food has a story, and sometimes it's not as simple as it seems. Subscribe to Rooted and Restless wherever you listen to podcasts or find us on YouTube.